What's happening, Hardscapers? This is episode 64 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk to you about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And today we're joined by Mark Nesbitt, a founder of Nesbitt Training, where he works to build better leaders through coaching, training, and speaking. And today he talks with us about what it means to be a leader in your business and how you can work to build up the employees in your business. So without further ado, here's our chat and our interview with Mark Nesbitt. Today, I'm joined by Mark Nesbitt. He's the founder of Nesbitt Training, where he works to build better leaders. Mark, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike. It's quite an honor to be obviously with you and the people with How to Hardscape.
I appreciate you taking the time and helping us out today. So, Mark, let's just get started today to learn a little bit more about yourself, how you got started in the industry, and what brought you to found Nesbitt Training.
Well, thanks. And that's a kind of an interesting question. And I have to admit, I get asked it quite often because I'm not your, what you'd call your typical leadership trainer. Truth be known, I actually grew up in the middle of a gravel pit. A family business that was run by my parents, and obviously, my sister, she's actually still there, and the business is still going today. But the thing is, I grew up in this family business, and I was always a get your hands dirty kind of guy. I'm not an academic, and never did want to be an academic. And the thing is that I really loved being in the construction type business, and I spent well over 30 years, we'll say, crushing rock. And in my my past life, as I like to refer to it, in crushing rock, I was really lucky that I was introduced to a lot of real good leadership training from the one particular company I spent 25 years with. But to add to that, I read my very first self-help book when I was in my late teens. It was called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it literally changed my life. It really did. It kind of put me on a new course and direction. But that being said, when I was in a lot of this leadership training that I was exposed to, I had a real hard time identifying with not only the material, but also the instructors, because the instructors, in my opinion, they'd never got their hands dirty. And what they were doing is they were covering the material. They were just there to cover the material. So I felt, hey, look, if I ever had the opportunity, I think I could do a better job. I really think I could do a better job. And I used to kind of say that to myself, knowing full well that I could speak the language to the people that got their hands dirty. So so after I left that company, I was with 25 years, and I was kind of tired of the industry. And I saw there was a void there. And, that's when I became a certified coach, trainer, and speaker for the John Maxwell team.
Amazing. And then, so Nesbitt Training has started up. So what exactly do you try to do over there at Nesbitt Training? Can you talk a little bit about that if somebody wants to, get into your program?
Well, so I feel, and I see it every day, there's a lot of people much like myself who probably worked a little harder than the person beside them. And if they were like me, maybe a little bit more mouthier. And because of that, they ended up in a leadership role, and not because they had any kind of people skills, but, they got ahead because, they were maybe a bit more assertive. And that's what happened to me. It's funny because I got my very first job as a leader. I was a foreman with Peter Kiewit, and I was actually in my late teens. And the reason I got my very first job as a foreman is I was a loader operator. I was really good at yelling at truck drivers to get truck drivers backed in so I could load more trucks. And that's kind of almost, the way it was, obviously, many years ago. The louder that you yelled, it seemed like the further you got ahead in some companies.
That's really interesting. So going back to that time where, you saw leaders as that, how have you seen leaders evolve today? What makes a good leader today in an industry?
Well, I think one of the things is that there's many things, but the biggest thing I feel that a leader is they have influence. And if I'm in a leadership role and I can't influence somebody to do something that they probably would not have done on their own, well, then I'm not a good leader. And obviously, there's a lot more involved with that. I like making reference to volunteers. We see people all the time that, they'll get involved with, say, the Cancer Society or the Food Bank or some of those churches, or some real good volunteer things out there. People get involved, and when they become a part of it, well, then they'll outperform, typically in a volunteer setting, more so than they will, maybe even on their career, just because they feel like they're a part of something. So when we're in a leadership role, it's up to us as leaders, to create that atmosphere where we're a part of something. It's just not, putting down interlock. There's more to that. We're making, we're making beauty in people's lives, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I want to kind of dive into with this episode, because most of our audience are owner operators. There's a few definitely foremen that are listening to this that want to know how to influence their crews to really buy into the bigger picture of the business, of what they're trying to do, and motivate them to become a part of it more. And I'm sure that has to do with creating a good culture in the company, and having good leadership within the company. So for a business owner, in terms of wanting to take that next step in their leadership, maybe they haven't even dived into the topic, haven't even, read a book about it yet. What's that first step in identifying, where they can improve their leadership, where they can take that next step in leadership training?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question, Mike. And I can be honest with you that it's a kind of a loaded question, because the very first person that I had to learn to lead was myself. And if I can't lead myself, I can't lead anybody else. And I'm going to tell you, putting a leash on myself when I was young was darn hard to do. And I had to take a look in the mirror and see, hey, look at, what am I doing wrong here? Because the only thing that I have complete control over in this world is my attitude. So I had to actually change my attitude. And, and in that, I started to learn and grow. It's amazing how, when it comes to leadership, I want to be careful how I say this, but I think, in my opinion, of course, it's only my opinion, I think some of the academic leadership stuff, we'll say, is somewhat overrated. You can't learn it in a school. You got to get out and you got to do it. For many, many years, I actually managed a quarry in Northern Ontario, and it was about a 7.5 hour drive from my house. And the reason I share this is that I like to tell everybody that I went to Highway 17 University, and I would listen to audiobooks, quite often, all the way there and all the way back. And sometimes it's as simple as, first we got to grow ourselves and then find a way to do it. And lots of times, it's way easier than we think. A number of years ago, when I actually started in business, it's funny because I had a subscription to Sirius Radio, and I canceled the subscription to Sirius Radio, and I said, I'm only going to listen to music on the weekends. So I only listened to podcasts and audiobooks and something where I would benefit and grow during the week. And doing something as simple as that, you'd be very, very surprised how, if we work on ourselves, then we can start to inspire others. Because you got to remember, we're an influence. If I show up on the job site and I haven't got my work boots tied up and I'm, not looking professional, I don't know how anybody else could do that. And if I show up 10 minutes late, well, guess what? Everybody else is going to show up 10 minutes late. So, the biggest thing is influence, but we got to, like I say, lead ourselves first. And sometimes that could be a real hard thing to do.
Yeah, and I feel like that comes from like the lead by example, and especially when we are trying to influence others, that's such a big part of it. And taking those steps to, like you said, teach yourself to become a leader. But what about the people around us? Once if we feel that we've got a good solid handle on ourselves, and kind of got this vision of where we see the business, how do we influence others around us? How do we get them to buy into that vision if it seems like maybe they're not so interested in it?
Well, again, I really believe that we can learn a lot from nonprofits. And I love sitting back watching nonprofits, because let's face it, everybody that kind of shows up there, for the most part, they're not there for a salary. They're there for a purpose. And I think one of the things that we have to do, and I try to, I've worked with well over 100 companies now, and one of the things that I strongly emphasize is that you got to have a good business statement. If it was Solomon who the claim was the wisest man that ever lived. That he said that where there was no vision, the people will perish. And lots of times, if we ask our people what they're doing, they don't know. They're just showing up, getting paid by the hour, and they're going to put down some sod today. And it's up to us as leaders, to create that vision. And I think the thing that's lacking sometimes is clarity. Like the number one thing we want from a leader is clarity. Uh, and again, I love watching what's going on in the world and using it for examples. And how often have we seen today's leaders, even in the political climate, they get asked a question, and my goodness, they can talk for 10 minutes about nothing and never answer it. And that does not work in the real world. We got to be very clear on what we're doing. One of the people, and if I can make a suggestion, I love his podcast, is Andy Stanley's leadership podcast. Andy Stanley refers to, people will want to know, what are we doing? Where are we going? And where do I fit in? And the interesting thing is that I'm guilty of this too. We quite often feel that, hey, well, I told them, well, they should know. Well, we have to tell them regularly. Like if I've been married now for close to 30 years. And if I had only told my wife once that I loved her, I'm guessing the marriage wouldn't last. I got to keep telling her. I got to keep telling my kids that. And again, we need to keep kind of telling our people where we're going, what we're doing, because you got to remember, people respond to what we talk about.
Now, you talked about clarification there and clarifying yourself and being clear. You've been to many different companies and seen many different things. So what is, say, one example that really stood out to you that this company had it and they were really clear with, like, what were they doing to show their employees that they were clear? Or maybe it's something that you recommended to them to do. What is that, one thing that kind of stood out to you that you said, wow, this is a really good idea to really show that you're being clear and intentional with your employees?
Well, there's many ways of doing it, and the thing is that I can promise you what works for, say, your company might not work for the other company. So it has to be, I think, very company specific and very team specific. But I'm a very, very firm believer that systems create behaviors. And our jobs as leaders is to put systems in place. And as crazy as it sounds, we all get up and we get dressed in the morning and we get dressed in a certain way. And I can promise that most people, when they get dressed in the morning, they would probably put on their underwear and then put on their jeans or their pants. And there's a certain way we do things. And I find it incredible how I go to job sites and I hear horror stories about nobody told me what to do. Nobody told me what to do. And this is where, I think one of the biggest things that I see with companies today is a lot of companies are missing the opportunity to invest in their people and to put some systems in place and say, look, this is how we do it here. And we show the people how to do it. Again, I'm probably more mature than what obviously what you are, Mike. And I remember, we'll say, go back 30 years ago, people knew what tools were. They would show up on a job site. It wasn't uncommon for somebody to show up on a job site 30 years ago to be an equipment operator. They knew what a grease gun was, they knew what grease was, they knew what a grease machine. Today is not uncommon for people to show up and don't know what that stuff is. And I like to kind of use the example, if we were to bring somebody from, say, the Far East, Saudi Arabia, and then they moved to Canada, and they wanted to be an NHL hockey player. Well, there's a lot involved. They got to get used to the cold. They got to learn how to skate. They got to learn how to tie skates and learn how to play the game. And that's no different than when we bring, say, new people onto the job site who've never worked before, doing hardscaping. They don't know what to do. And the interesting thing is that I think it's safe to say, a lot of us, we've forgotten how much we know. And we got to get back to kind of, seeing stuff through their eyes and seeing what they need to see.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it, being able to just put yourself in their shoes and to kind of and see where they need to improve, see where they need to learn in order to be confident on the job site. And what does that look like? Does that look like building a training program? Does that look like having a video that you can show them before they come to the job site? And I'm sure it varies from business to business, but in your eyes, what would that look like in terms of making sure that they're coming their first time on the job site and they actually have some frame of reference?
Some of these questions I want to be careful because they're, you got to remember, I work with companies lots of times for weeks on end, and it's hard to answer a question sometimes in a couple of minutes. But the interesting thing is that we can always learn. Success leaves clues. We can learn from other companies. I remember reading, and I've read it a couple of times now, how when you start to work at Starbucks, one of the first things that they do at Starbucks is they assign you a mentor. Because I know what it's like to go on the job the first day on the job, and they're trying to tell me so much stuff at once, and like I said to you earlier, Mike, I have troubles hearing. I wear 2 hearing aids, and sometimes you go on a job, you don't hear everything, and you're too afraid to ask. And I'll give you even a better example. I was in Toronto last week, actually, with Parkscape, and very multicultural team, and there's a language barrier there. So not only when we get to a job site, sometimes is it hard to hear with the cutoffs on in the background, but the thing is that we got to make sure that people hear us and they hear us loud. Yeah, and when I'm like I say, I remember going back the first day on the job, and somebody telling me something that I couldn't take it in. All I want to do is go to the washroom. And when you get something else in your mind, the learning is stopped. And it's nice to have that mentor say, hey, look, when I leave here, we're busy here, but if you need some help, just go and see Fred over there. Fred's been around a long time, and he's going to do whatever he can to help you. And not only that, like when you see what some other companies do, you got to remember the very first day in the job when somebody shows up to work, that's when they're most impressionable. And I think there's a lot of value in company owners, taking people for a walk around the job site and saying, hey, look, this is, say the name of your company. This is a family-run business. I take a lot of pride in what I do. And we want to build quality here, and we like repeat customers. A lot of the work we get is from referrals. Whether you may recognize this or not, you're going to be a kind of a billboard for this company, so we got to be professional. This is what we do here. And if you're not going to be real happy doing what we do, maybe you're not going to be happy in this trade. But this is who we are, and this is how we behave. And I think that's got to be spelled out very, very loud and clear. And the trouble with a lot of companies today, I think a lot of bigger ones, they've got a system in place that's so formalized that it's not personal. When is the last time you heard of somebody, a company owner or a manager or leader actually taking somebody for a walk around and having a one-on-one with them that wasn't scripted the first day on the job?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the idea of that mentor, assigning a mentor so that they know if they have a question, they can come to this person and they're not feeling like they're being a burden on somebody, because this mentor has been assigned to them and they know that they can constantly ask as many questions to that person and it's not a burden to them because they've been assigned as a mentor. Have you seen this in practice a lot out in the field, and has it been really fruitful for that company?
Well, yeah, mainly with the companies that I've worked with. Like I've obviously got to work with a lot of companies, and I've suggested that, and yes, they've done it. And then to add to that, we typically will live up to the expectations that our leaders put on us. So if you go to one of your people and with you a long time, and you say, "Hey, look, if you don't mind, I'd like you to be a mentor to this new person." Well, that also kind of it shows that person that you're asking to be the mentor, that you trust them, and and trust is a big thing. And the thing is, we're not going to gain trust if we don't give it away. So yeah, it works wonders.
Yeah, and then coming to that whole thing, you're obviously a leader in your business. And then if you're identifying a mentor, typically they'll have leadership qualities or you might identify them already as a leader. So as a business owner, how do you identify the leaders in your business? Is it, going back to your initial analogy about, uh, back in the day, you were one of the louder ones, being able to direct trucks, and maybe people recognize you as a leader for those qualities. What about qualities today? What can we as business owners identify the leaders in our business?
Well, it's interesting because there are people. I'll give you an example. The very first time I heard John Maxwell speak, it was at a simulcast event, and he had mentioned how just because you have the position does not make you a leader. And a lot of people think because they have the position they're the actual leader. Kind of a classic example. I managed quarries all over the province. Okay, and I would go into one quarry in particular, and I never forget it. That one quarry, the water truck driver had more influence what went on that quarry than the foreman did. And I've seen over loader operators have more influence that go on inside a quarry than the foreman does. So this is where we need to sit back and just see who the influencers is. And one of the easiest ways to do that is that, you ask a question, what should we do? And if everybody looks at that one person, that's the leader. And, that the fascinating thing is like I say, a lot of the times we think just because we have the position we're leading, well, we're not. There's lots of people, on our teams that are leading and they don't know they're leading. And we need to kind of make sure and capitalize on the influence that they have.
Absolutely. And Mark, I know we're jumping around quite a bit, but this is a great sort of broad overall outlook on leadership. And with being a leader comes identifying other leaders in your business, as well as being able to invest into the people in your business to build them up. And what can we do as business owners to invest into the people on our job sites, in our crews, in our business? How can we invest in them to build them up?
Well, like I want to be careful here that I'm not trying to sell you something out of the trunk of my car or trying to do sales pitch, because that's not what I'm doing. But one of the first things we need to do is we need to invest in our people. It's amazing how something as simple, and I did this with a lot of companies, start a library, have 3 or 4 books. They could be audiobooks, share them with your people. If you read a page in a book or an article in a magazine, highlight it, take a picture, send it to the team, share it. It starts something as simple as small as that. But funny thing is that some companies in particular, they feel that well, why invest in them? They're only going to, as soon as I train them, they're going to leave. Well, the flip side of that is that if we don't invest in them, they could stick around too. And there's nothing more sad than having somebody on the team that's been there 10 years and maybe we missed their potential. And quite often those people know what's going on. Like they know how to fix it. I'll give you a real good example. The people closest to the fire know what's burning. I do a lot of SWOT analysis with companies, and a SWOT analysis is simply where you look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of a company, and quite often we'll bring in the entire team. But I'll just ask the question, hey, what frustrates you? And you'd be surprised how the stuff that frustrates the team, is an easy fix. And we can learn from them. But when, again, if we don't listen to them, they're not going to listen to us. And sometimes that's the easiest way, to start with the training is just to get from, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? What can I do, to help you? And you got to remember, I'm a very firm believer, as leaders, as business owners, when we show the team that we're going to invest in them, it kind of turns on a big red light switch that, that the company cares. Because, how often have we heard that the company doesn't care about me? The company doesn't care. But, you start investing in your people. And of course, then they feel that the company cares. And that's one thing that's, I think, very common with millennials. They want that. They need that, and they're really craving that.
Excellent advice. I love this information, and the just yeah, I love the idea of opening up a library, and even it can, if it can be audiobooks that everyone can listen to, or a subscription of some sort that everybody can access, and just in asking questions, like you said, and actually listening to them, and then taking action to show that you listen to them can speak wonders to the people in your business, and especially when you want to grow a culture of positivity in your business, and that everybody is a part of the same thing, so to speak.
Well, exactly. And as leaders, we're in charge of culture.
Mm-hmm.
We're the ones that people are watching. And to get back to the last question, just to add to it, there's even some companies say we can't afford it. We can't afford it, and I understand that. I understand. I know what it's like to be in business and have just enough money to pay the visa off this month. I've been there. Uh, but the interesting thing is that uh, there's a lot of government programs out there, and some I think are better than others. But there is one government program out there that's called the Canadian Ontario Job Grants Funding.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is, I think, one of the best funding deals there is with the government. And if you want to invest in somebody on your team, if you see there's a future in them, the government will actually help pay for the training. And it's a simple program. Lots of companies leverage it. I've leveraged it in the past with different companies. So, if, say, for example, you want to invest in somebody and on your team, or you want to invest in the company, that the people in the company, I'm like, you can't use the funding obviously to buy a company, but you can use it to invest the people in your company. There's, like I say, there's funding out there to actually help assist, with this. So it lessens the burden on the owners.
I love that idea. Finding the funding in the grants to be able to help train your crews that's incredible. Mark, I've really enjoyed this chat. This has been awesome. In terms of being a leader in your company, and affecting the culture in your company, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you feel would be of value to our audience, in terms of leadership, in terms of anything that we've talked about, or something that you want to highlight one more time before we come to an end here?
Well, I think, that I just want to point out that there has not been a new philosophy in 2,000 years. It's the same old deal. We've heard it said, I've heard it said that, you reap what you sow. Some people call it karma. I think it's safe to say we always got to try and do the right thing. And when we show people that we care about them, and sometimes that can be darn hard to do. I gotta be honest with you, Mike. Some of the stuff that I'm talking about, it's a lot easier to talk about than it is to do. And the last thing I want to do is come on here and say that I'm perfect, because I'm not. I still make mistakes daily, and I think it's safe to say we all do. But we got to keep trying to improve ourselves, and the goal can be, if we can be just a little bit better, say tomorrow, than we are today, well, then we've succeeded. And if we just got to keep doing that, just keep trudging ahead, and try to get a little bit better. And as leaders, like I say, we're the ones setting the culture. And if we don't grow and change, we can't expect anybody else on the team to. And the interesting thing is too, is that, we attract who we are, not who we want. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement. We attract who we are, not who we want. So we want to attract high quality people, professional people. Well, then, the interesting thing is, then we better make sure that we're professional, and that to attract the professionals that we need. Because it's I think some of us have heard it, that maybe some of these trades some people might look down on them. Well, I'm going to tell you, to me, there's more skill involved with doing what we're doing, what you're doing, than a lot of other trades. Every doctor needs a plumber. Every doctor needs or every dentist needs a mechanic. We all want to eat and sleep indoors, but it seems like nobody wants to do the work. And I think some of that is because it's somewhat looked down on, and that's wrong. You guys are professionals. What you do is it's beautiful. It's a work of art. And, we got to make sure and keep talking about that. What you're doing is something good. It's not just raking topsoil. There's a bigger picture to that. And this is where us as leaders, we got to create that vision and we got to paint that picture. Hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And sometimes, when you're working away and sweating like crazy, it's hard to kind of keep that in the forefront. Hey, we're doing something great here. The thing is, you're doing something great and you can't quit. You got to keep doing it great.
Absolutely. Excellent advice. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great chat, and I'm excited to get this out into other people's ears.
Well, again, Mike, thanks so much for having me. Like I say, there's so much to cover because it's such a big topic. But the thing is that, the funny thing is, it was Abe Lincoln that says, if you're going to take 6 hours to cut a tree, that he take the first 4 hours to sharpen the axe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at every hockey team, they have a training camp and they send their players away to training before they go to work. And if you watch a football game, before they have a play, they have a huddle. And why can't we adopt some of that stuff with what we do? Before you do something, take a 5-minute huddle and say, this is what we're doing. Simple tricks.
Where can our audience find out more about yourself, your training, everything that you have going on online?
Well, the easiest thing is they can check out my website at nesbitttraining.ca. I love Instagram. I love being on Instagram. You can check me out on Instagram at Mark Nesbitt. You can reach me at mark@nesbitttraining.ca. Or, I'm an old-fashioned guy. The phone works too. So 613-402-5764. I'd love to hear from you because, I want to help people. That's my desire now. I want to help people. And if I can help companies, people who are struggling, my God, I can really sleep good at night knowing I helped somebody.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Visit us at howtohardscape.com for more information on this subject. Let us know what you want to learn about in future episodes by contacting us on our socials. We're at How to Hardscape on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also check out our new merch lineup at howtohardscape.com/merch. Support the show, support us doing our thing by purchasing How to Hardscape or I Am a Hardscaper piece of merch. And we'd love it if you subscribe to our podcast, left us a rating and review. As always, this helps us get this podcast out there into more people's ears. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.